Hello friends and subscribers, welcome back to Readings in Impact Investing. My name is Daniel Rosehill and this is a podcast which takes useful source material in the world of impact investing and brings it into the format of audio so that you can listen to it wherever and however you like to listen. Today I thought it would be good to look at a DIB, and the inspiration, if you will, for this episode came about from looking at the work of the Education Outcomes Fund, EOF, in the previous episode, and they highlighted in their case studies of the case for outcomes-based funding, the Educate Girls DIB. So I thought in this episode it would be good to look at the actual deployment of this, how this DIB worked, because I think it's very interesting to look at the financial, what I call the financial plumbing necessary to make impact investing work for the world, with these outcomes funds focused on achieving outcomes, paying impact investors for results, outcomes funding, pay for success. But I think it's also important to look at the actual change, or vital, I should say, to look at the actual change being achieved to the beneficiaries of all of this, the people on the ground. So this is a little bit about Educate Girls. They work with the government, community and village-based volunteers to ensure that every girl in the remotest parts of India is enrolled in school and learns well. Established in 2007, Educate Girls is a non-profit that focuses on mobilizing communities for girls' education in India's rural and educationally backward areas. Educate Girls currently operates in over 24,000 villages in Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, Uttar Pradesh and Bihar. I've never had the privilege of going to India, but I recognize some of these places, some of these names from friends who've been there. Very beautiful places. By leveraging the government's existing investment and by engaging with a huge base of community volunteers, Educate Girls helps to identify, enroll and retain out-of-school girls and to improve foundational skills in literacy and numeracy. So now let's take a look at the DIB. So this DIB this is past tense, it's being concluded. It was basically a proof of concept DIB in using the DIB mechanism for education. They say it was the world's first DIB in education, and it surpassed both its target outcomes. It got 160% of the total learning target and 116% of the total enrollment target. And what's interesting about this, well, firstly, it was successful, which is, of course, great. It was really a pilot. It was quite small in scope. But through presenting this DIB, I hope it becomes clear how all the actors fit together in the jigsaw, because I think it's a little bit, can be a little bit confusing sometimes. So I'm just going to kind of describe the schematic here, how they have it laid out. They have Instiglio as project manager. So they're basically managing this DIB. At the bottom, you have a MOU with the government of Rajasthan. So the government was involved through the conclusion of a memorandum of understanding. You have the investor UBS Optimus Foundation. Now, in some SIBs, this can be for-profit capital. In this case, I feel like it's a little bit confusing because UBS Optimus Foundation is investing in good. It's putting money in. It's reinvesting it in other social goods, basically. So it's not like a traditional investor that just wants to make a rate of return, maybe a classical impact investor. So there can be different categories of investors, what I'm trying to say, in DIBs. They can be DFIs, they can be foundations, or they can be more pure play impact investors. Then you have the service provider, of course, Educate Girls. You have ID Insight, which was the outcome evaluator, and then you have the outcome payer, which is Children's Investment Fund Foundation. So Educate Girls, along with UBS Optimus Foundation and the Children Investments Fund Foundation, CIFF, launched the world's first DIB in education. This three-year project, 2015 to 2018, tied funding to pure outcomes and was intended as a proof of concept. In this payments by results model, CIFF, so that's Children's Investment Fund Foundation, they were the outcomes payer. So they promised to pay back the investor, UBSOF, UBS Optimus Foundation, the original investment amount plus extra returns as long as the agreed targets were delivered by Educate Girls. The Educate Girls DIB targeted increased enrollment of marginalised girls and children's progress in literacy and numeracy outcomes as assessed by an independent evaluator. That independent evaluator was ID Insight. Results-based financing consultancy in Stiglio designed the DIB and provided performance management support to educate girls. $270,000 project, 7,300 children, 166 schools, and they did well, basically. The results were good. So they got media coverage. They have it listed here. The Economist, Bloomberg, Devex, World Economic Forum, Barron's, Brookings, Hindustan Times, Stanford Social Innovation Review. So a mixture of big financial media, local media, and impact-specific media. So there was quite good interest generated, which is obviously very important to the idea of mainstreaming this approach. So I'm just going to read from not exactly all of it, but sections of their document. It's called Lessons from the Educate Girls DIB. So they have, again, the structure, which I'm not going to repeat because we just did it. We talked about the scope. The targets were improved learning outcomes in literacy and numeracy. That was 80% of the focus. And then the enrollment of out-of-school girls was 20% of the focus. So they surpassed both targets. They did a bit better on the learning target, 160% versus the enrollment target. And then they talk about how they were measured. So let's dive into this document here. Enrollment outcomes. Student enrollment is defined by the percentage of out-of-school girls enrolled in school by the end of the third year. Educate Girls performed a door-to-door survey to identify them. I'm just kind of loosely quoting this here. Then for learning outcomes, they used the ACER test, ASER, a widely used test of basic literacy and numeracy in a randomized controlled trial. In the case of Educate Girls, the test measured 3 proficiencies. Those were Hindi, English, and mathematics. The tests were administered to students before and after the intervention. ID Insight measured the impact based on learning gains for students in grades 3 to 5. So they went door to door to see who was enrolled, and for learning outcomes, they used the standardized ACER testing, and they did 3 proficiencies. So what the results mean, this is I think the best one here. In the final year, learning outcomes for students in the program grew 79% more than their peers in other schools, almost the difference of an entire additional year of instruction. So really, really very quite impressive gains. And as I mentioned, they actually they succeeded in both measures. So they have some lessons to be learned here. Focus on outcomes. The underlying focus on results in the DIB helped in clearly defining success. Programs delivery. Educate Girls shifted to a child-centric approach, which included focusing on each student in the classroom, tracking each child's progress, and conducting exercises to increase learning gains, flexibility, and then data-driven decision-making. So this is a document authored by Educate Girls itself. So basically what they learned through the execution of this DIB, their insights. If you want to read the whole report, it's on their site. I'm just going to read the conclusion. Strategy which is part of PwC Group, spent 16 weeks to create their 5-year strategy, and it recommended a roadmap for expanding the DIB between 2019 and 2024. So obviously I'm reading this in 2024, and I don't know exactly how those expansion efforts have gone, but it was a successful initial pilot, and they drew lessons about how this works and the fact that this can work. So we discussed that the Education Outcomes Fund has its top level aim as pooling $1 billion in aid and philanthropic funding by the year 2030 to transform the lives of over 10 million children and youth. So this is both a relatively modest capital amount and scope, but the idea of the Outcomes Fund, and remember we talked about Outcomes Fund as the benefits of being that they can make the supply of capital to these impact bonds much more both steady, and also they can simplify the rollout of these impact bonds, because the idea being that the capital is already available instead of having to be assembled each time. So we're going to have, the vision here is that a big pool of capital like EOF pools together all this philanthropic and grant capital and then disperses it to these projects. So this DIB being just one of the projects. So that's their vision. I thought it'd be also interesting. I found the Government's Outcomes Lab, GeoLab at Oxford, have a linked off to a UBS report, which attracted my interest because it provides the perspective of the investor, in inverted commas, in this DIB. So a lot of the material is, as you'd expect, repetitive with the previous reports. I'm not going to read it. They explain what the mechanism was. They explain where the service provider Educate Girls is operating. But they also go a little bit deeper into the financials. So the social investor, which was UBS Optimus, as we recall, provided the upfront working capital of $270,000 US dollars. And at page 5, we get the outcome. As a result of the overachievement, remember that the delivery organization overachieved on both of the targets. UBSOF firstly recouped its initial funding, as you would expect, as the mechanism stipulates, I should say, really, plus a 15% internal rate of return, which equaled USD 144,085 from the outcome payer CIFF. The total payout will be reinvested into further impactful development programs. EG will receive 32% of the internal rate of return, with the rest going to other UBSOF programs. So basically, they're actually making money out of this transaction, in inverted commas, and using that to do more good. So as I said, this isn't really a classical impact investor in the sense of a for-profit impact investor. This is a foundation that is trying to maximize the good it does. So it's actually generating money, so to speak, from this mechanism and then using it to put that into other initiatives. And that's really actually all I wanted to read from their report, just to see it from their perspective. And I'm sure that there's a longer report for those really interested to get a lot of get as much information from this as possible. I'd point you in the direction of the ID Insight report. They have the evaluation report, and it's a 36-page document from June 2018. So we've kind of looked at it really from all angles now, or sorry, I should say, if you want to read this report, you can look at it from all angles, except that of the outcomes payer, the Children's Investment Fund Foundation. And I don't know, they may also have literature about this DIB on their website. But I think that provides enough kind of information about how this worked in practice and how this how outcomes funds, the vision of outcomes funds to scale up projects exactly like this DIB times 100 or times 1,000. That's the idea here, is to get these from pilots into full-sized initiatives and to increase their number across all manner of social and environmental challenges. Thank you for listening to today's episode of Readings in Impact Investing, or one of today's. I've uploaded a few for my recording batch. I hope this was helpful. If you want to tell your colleagues about this podcast, that would be very much appreciated so that we continue to spread and grow. It's readingsinImpact.org. This has been me, Daniel Rosehill. If you do want to get in touch to suggest anything, to suggest a report, to suggest a case study, please feel free to do so. It's public at danielrosehill.com. Rosehill is Rosehill. Thank you for listening, and until the next episode.